Chapter 4. Convincing Sarah Jane to leave cost me $10, 3 candy bars, 2 Captain Marvel comic books, and my backpack. If she were the newshound she claimed to be, and weddings sold a gazillion papers, I wondered if Sarah Jane would really stay away. I almost wish we could trade places. I would have been happy to let someone else sit through the marriage ceremony in my place. But Fisher Beaumont's wedding didn't completely reek, or make me yawn my face in half the way I had expected. Family and friends gathered in a glade above the ranch's main buildings, surrounded on 3 sides by towering ponderosa's. 2 tall birch trees grew in the center of the open space, their branches laced like fingers to form an arch. The bride and groom stood beneath the trees, flanked by a pair of ancient juniper stumps that twisted like sawn-off pillars. Each stump supported a basket of flowers, blooming in super-fast motion, seed to sprout to flower to seed again, while 100 hummingbirds hummed overhead. Aside from looking like the backdrop to one of Fedora's animated princess movies, the effect was kinda cool. My knee bobbed up and down mechanically. I tugged at the necktie Mom had made me wear. If Sarah Jane had doubled back to sneak a scoop, she was certainly getting an eyeful of odd, substantial amounts of strange, an entire paper's worth of peculiar. And despite my nagging Sarah Jane's worries, I actually liked watching the bride. She was pretty, and she could float. Really float. 6 inches off the ground float. The Earth's pool didn't trouble Melly Danzinger the way that it did the rest of us. My cousin Fish was marrying a girl from another savvy family, just like Grandpa Bomba did when he married Grandma Dollop long ago. There were unusual families like ours, from California to Maine, making double-doozy weddings like this one happen now and then. Fish's swirling gusts of wind ruffled the gauzy stuff of Melly's dress and veil as she hovered in her own small anti-gravity pocket of the world. But when the minister opened the Beaumont family's big pink Bible, Fish pulled his bride down to earth with a cockeyed grin. Fish's hair looked like it had been hit so many times with powerful blasts of wind, that it was starting to grow farther and farther away from his face, like dry grass trying to grow on a wind-scoured mountainside. I suppose that Fish, at 23 and all, grown up, was old enough to get married, but my cousin still seemed way too young to be going bald already like his papa. That poor kid. Got his mom's bloodline and his dad's hairline, Dad chuckled softly next to Mom. What's Dad laughing at, Ledge? Fedora whispered, jabbing me in the ribs with her elbow, as tense and tight as a coiled-up watch spring. I resisted the urge to jab back. I knew I'd be the one to get in trouble if my sister started whining. Sitting with the rest of the guests in the glow of the summer evening sunlight, I jumped every time a twig cracked or an insect thrummed. When I wasn't watching the bride, I was scanning the edge of the glade, or turning to look over the heads of the people behind me, searching for the telltale glint of prying green eyes. Ledger, stop fidgeting, Mom whispered in my ear, as I shifted uncomfortably against the hard, molded plastic of my seat, beginning to feel exactly which part of me had gotten banged up. Outside the 5 and dime. If I hadn't been worried about Sarah Jane, the snoop, I might have dozed off like Grandpa Bomba, whose colorful, overstuffed armchair stood out amid the sea of smaller plastic ones. It's nearly over, Ledge, Mom breathed, and with a quick flash of her savvy smile, she added, Sit still for 20 minutes, then you can run free. The commands that came with time limits had always been the worst. The more specific Mom got, the harder she was to ignore. I was stuck, staring forward like a statue, frozen in a savvy-powered timeout that did nothing to improve my mood or my nervous jitters. Fixed in place, I could feel my own savvy start to build, like an itchy foot inside a winter boot. It threatened to drive me mad. After the I-do's, but before the final just-kissed-the-bride-already smooch, Fish's younger sister, Gypsy, stood up in front of everyone. Gypsy Beaumont hadn't changed much since I'd seen her 3 years before, at her brother Samson's savvy birthday. She was 12 now, almost 13 like me. But Gypsy still looked like one of my sister's dolls after 6 months of play and make-believe. Tangled curls pulled into a sizable rat's nest puff on top of her head. Cheeks pink, Shoes gone missing. Gypsy stepped lightly, carrying an old glass jar, toward one of the stumps, oblivious to the sharp meadow grass and prickly pine needles under her bare feet. I recognized the jar that Gypsy set down next to the fast-forward flowers. I could see the faded antique red and yellow Peter Pan peanut butter label easily from where I sat. It had to be the oldest peanut butter jar ever. But there was something far more interesting inside this jar than a smush of crushed-up peanuts. This was one of my Grandma Dollop's jars, the jar she and Grandpa had had at their wedding. Practically a family heirloom. Gypsy gave the white metal lid half a twist. Instantly, music rose from inside the glass. Trumpets, violins, and whatnot filled the glade, crackling with the static of a classical radio broadcast, captured over 50 years past. Every note had been caught inside that jar, pulled from the air by our Grandma Dollop, then canned the way other grandmas might can string beans or salsa. Only Grandma had known how her savvy held the music inside those jars. But she wasn't around anymore for us to ask. I wondered what Sarah Jane would think of Grandma Dollop's jar if she saw it. I tried to turn to look for her again before remembering that I was still stoned for 10 more minutes. All I could see was the ceremony in front of me. The trees, the stumps, and Grandpa Bomba, swaying his wobbling head to the music. As the canned orchestra continued to play, and I continued to stew, a woman in a floppy, flowery hat turned in her seat in front of me. Great Aunt Jules had small, squinty eyes and arms so round her watchband cinched her wrist as tight as a twist in a balloon animal. Such a lovely tradition, my sister's wedding jar. So many of us have used it. I can't wait for the days when my own grandchildren ask for it. She dabbed her squinty eyes with a tissue. Dolly sure did have a savvy to hold on to. Then Aunt Jules stopped sniffing. Tilting her chin in my direction, she eyed me like some sorry reject from the savvy factory. Is it true nothing happened on this one's birthday, Dinah dear? She whispered loudly to my mom. It took all the strength I had not to say something rude. Dad gave a soft snort, covering it quickly with a cough. That's nothing you need to trouble yourself with, Aunt Jules, Mom answered. I simmered in my seat, but Mom touched the back of my hand once lightly, as if to say, Ignore her, Ledge. I didn't care if she was Grandma Dollop's older sister. I glared at Aunt Jules, feeling a vague prickle run beneath my skin. Then I watched, helpless, as the woman's wristwatch fell apart. Gears and pins and cogs flew everywhere. But Aunt Jules didn't seem to notice. Issuing 2 tisks in a tut over my sorry lack of talent, she turned back around as the fanfare from the peanut butter jar wound down. Watch it, Ledge! Fedora leaned across my frozen leg to a waggle of finger in my face. Don't forget! Safety has no quitting time. From the corner of my eye, I saw Dad brush a cog off his sleeve, shaking his head at Fedora's puns, or at his defective son. If Sarah Jane was watching from some hidden spot, I hoped she hadn't witnessed my latest bit of damage. That she hadn't guessed yet that I was an undeniable danger to metallic, mechanical, man-made things. Everyone cheered as Fish and Millie kissed at last. Everyone but me. The cheers set off a frenzied swirl of colors. Hundreds of butterflies rose into the air around the couple in a technicolor tornado, then scattered and split the scene, all orchestrated by Uncle Autry, like some insect rodeo air show. The towering birch trees began to creak and groan, bending and swaying as Fish blasted the glade, with a happy rumbustious storm. Women clutched their skirts, men grabbed their neckties. I squinted against the wind, but I couldn't even raise a hand to shield my eyes. Let's hope this is the worst the boy lets his love-struck bluster get, Great Aunt Jules harumphed as she lost her flowery hat to the wind. I'd hate to see young Fisher damage these fine birches. Trees like these don't grow up overnight, you know. Not since we lost the last Beecham with any talent. Another gust of wind carried a cloud of dust and grit in our direction. Great Aunt Jules began to sniff and snort, pressing a round finger beneath her nose to keep herself from sneezing. "Lands, don't get me going," she exclaimed, holding her breath. "If I start sneezing now, I might send myself back in time to the last wedding on this ranch. It would take me forever to catch back up." Aunt Jules jumped back in time 20 minutes every time she sneezed, making me wish for a jumbo jar of pepper. I'd happily send her back in time, back to the days of the dinosaurs. The wind settled as soon as Fish and Melly swept down the path toward the barn, where the real party was about to start. Looking pleased to see his younger brother hitched and happy, Rocket Beaumont strode with the rest of the family between the rows of chairs, moving electrons in his wake, and giving everyone sitting or standing near him a hair-raising moment. No one could forget that Rocket was electric. When he was 17, Rocket triggered serious power outages and a mondo mayhem after a car accident put the Beaumont's papa, my Uncle Abram, in the hospital. A year later, Rocket decided he'd be better off at the ranch. People chatted and laughed as they followed the newlyweds down the hill. Fedora took off at a run, eager to retrieve her helmet. She'd been hopping mad when Mom made her take it off for the ceremony. My parents quickly sidestepped Great Aunt Jules. Mom and Dad must have assumed that I was right behind them as they followed the others down the path. But I was still caught, not going anywhere. And unlike my cousin Rocket, who'd been here 8 years already, the only place I wanted to go was home.